I never thought I'd find myself in this kind of situation, but life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. My name is Jake, and I've been married to the love of my life, Sarah, for 7 years. We were that couple everyone envied, the perfect match, best friends, the whole shebang. Sarah was beautiful, smart, and had this infectious laugh that could light up a room. We had built a comfortable life together, complete with a house in the suburbs and a golden retriever named Max. But over the past few months, things started to feel off. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. There were small signs, like how Sarah was suddenly more preoccupied with her appearance. She started working late more frequently, always with some vague excuse about her job at the marketing firm. I noticed the little things. Her phone was always face down, and she'd become a bit more secretive. When I asked her about it, she would brush it off with a wave, telling me I was being paranoid. The turning point came on a Friday night. I had just finished a grueling week at work and planned a romantic evening at home. I made her favorite dinner and opened a bottle of wine, hoping to reconnect. But when Sarah walked through the door, she seemed distant. After a few minutes of forced conversation, she announced she had plans with friends. Friends, she had never mentioned anything about going out. I felt a twinge of annoyance but tried to play it cool. After all, I trusted her. At least I thought I did. As she got ready, I could feel a knot forming in my stomach. Something didn't sit right. Then I did the unthinkable. I picked up her phone to send a quick text to her friend, hoping to get a better idea of where she was headed. But the moment I unlocked it, I saw several messages from my best friend, Mark. My heart sank. They were flirty, full of inside jokes and emojis. I felt sick to my stomach, as if someone had punched me in the gut. I quickly closed the phone and pretended to be busy when Sarah came back down. She looked beautiful, but I barely saw her. My mind raced with questions. Had I been blind to what was going on? How long had this been happening? Instead of confronting her right then, I decided to gather more evidence. Over the next week, I watched her like a hawk. I noticed her leaving the house with a little too much excitement in her step. I knew Mark was also involved, and though he had been my best friend for years, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were crossing a line together. One evening, I followed her when she left the house, heart pounding, each beat echoing my anxiety. They met at a bar across town. I parked a block away and watched as Sarah and Mark walked in together, sharing laughs and drinks. I felt a mix of rage and heartbreak. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. How could she do this to me, to us? I sat in my car for what felt like hours, trying to process the scene unfolding before me. When they finally left the bar, I decided to confront them. I pulled up next to them, heart racing, and shouted Sarah's name. She turned, her face falling as she registered my presence. Mark looked like a deer caught in headlights. "Jake, what are you doing here?" Sarah stammered, trying to compose herself, but I could see the panic in her eyes. I stepped out of the car, adrenaline coursing through my veins. "What do you think I'm doing here? I saw everything." I shot back, pointing at Mark. The confrontation that followed was a whirlwind of emotions. Sarah was defensive, insisting it was nothing, just a friendly outing. Mark tried to backpedal, claiming it was all innocent. I was furious, filled with disbelief. The weight of the betrayal crashed down on me like a tidal wave. This wasn't just an affair. It was a violation of everything I thought we had built together. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and confusion. I thought I knew Sarah, and now I felt like I barely knew her at all. I spent the night tossing and turning, my mind racing with thoughts. How could I let this happen? What was I going to do? I felt lost, unsure of how to proceed or what the future held for us. I knew I needed to confront her again, but I had to figure out how to do it without losing my mind. I needed to gather my thoughts, and more importantly, I needed a plan. I had been blindsided, but now that I knew, it was time for me to think about how to respond. I was determined to make sure both Sarah and Mark understood the magnitude of their betrayal, but I had to be smart about it. A wave of cold determination washed over me. This was not going to end quietly. I was going to make sure they both suffered for what they had done. The days that followed felt like an endless blur of anger and disbelief. I spent most of my time in a daze, replaying the confrontation over and over in my mind. I had never felt so betrayed, so lost. I went to work, but my mind was elsewhere. Friends and coworkers noticed my distracted demeanor, asking if I was okay. I forced smiles, but inside I was boiling with resentment. With each passing day, I found myself thinking more about my next steps. I knew I needed a plan, one that would make Sarah and Mark feel the sting of their betrayal. I started by gathering evidence. I needed to document everything, the messages, the times they met, even the little lies Sarah told. I went through her phone again, taking screenshots of all the flirty exchanges. I felt like a detective in a movie, piecing together the puzzle of their affair. There was a part of me that felt guilty for invading her privacy, but I pushed that aside. They had crossed a line, and I was determined to show them the consequences. I began to map out my revenge, focusing on how to hit them where it hurt most. My first thought was to expose them to our friends and family. I started calling some of our mutual friends, casually dropping hints about Sarah's behavior. "You won't believe what Sarah has been up to," I would say, keeping my tone light but loaded with intention. The looks on their faces when I mentioned her late nights and sudden mysterious plans were priceless. I could see the wheels turning in their heads, connecting the dots. As the week wore on, I couldn't help but feel a sense of empowerment. They had thought I was a fool, living in my own little world. But now I was the one pulling the strings, and it felt good. I didn't want to just expose the affair. I wanted Sarah to understand the depth of her betrayal and how much it hurt me. I decided to confront Mark next. I had known him for years, and the trust I once had in him was shattered. I called him up, feigning casualness. "Hey man, can we meet up? I need to talk to you about something." He agreed, and we met at a local diner. Mark looked nervous when he arrived, scanning the room as if he expected trouble. I couldn't help but notice the guilt etched on his face. I sat down across from him, trying to keep my composure. "Jake, what's going on?" he asked, glancing around as if he didn't want anyone to overhear us. "Cut the crap, Mark. I know about you and Sarah," I said, my voice low but firm. His face went pale, and for a moment I reveled in the shock in his eyes. "What are you talking about?" he stammered, but it was clear he knew exactly what I meant. "You can drop the act. I have the messages. I saw you two together," I said, leaning in closer. "You think you can just waltz into my life and take what's mine?" He started to defend himself, trying to play it off as just a little fling, something harmless, but I wasn't having it. "You're my best friend, and you went behind my back. You need to understand the consequences of your actions. I'm going to tell everyone what you've done, and trust me, it's going to hurt." I watched as the color drained from his face. The realization hit him hard. I could see the panic setting in as he realized I wasn't joking. I stood up to leave, giving him one last look. "Enjoy your little secret while it lasts, Mark. I'm just getting started." As I left the diner, I felt a rush of satisfaction. I knew that word would spread quickly, and the fallout would be devastating for both of them. I spent the next few days letting the news seep out, watching as the reactions from friends poured in. Some were shocked, others supportive, but all were curious about the details. I could see Sarah's facade starting to crack. She was defensive at first, but as rumors circulated, I could tell she was panicking. She confronted me, demanding to know why I was saying these things. I played it cool, acting like I was oblivious to the chaos I had unleashed. "Just saying what I heard, Sarah. You know how rumors get around," I replied nonchalantly, a smirk creeping onto my face. Her eyes blazed with anger. "You're just trying to hurt me because you're jealous. This is ridiculous." But I could see the fear in her eyes. She was losing control, and I wanted her to feel that. I wanted her to feel the weight of her actions. The emotional high from carrying out my plan was intoxicating, but beneath it all, I felt a twinge of guilt. There were moments when I questioned whether it was right to drag our friends into this. But then I remembered the betrayal, the feeling of being stabbed in the back by someone I loved and trusted. They deserved to know the truth. As the days turned into weeks, the impact of my actions rippled through our social circle. Sarah became more and more isolated, and I could see her unraveling. The woman who once seemed invincible was now a shadow of her former self. And while I was consumed by a mix of satisfaction and sadness, I knew I was just getting started. I had plans, and I wanted to ensure they both learned that actions have consequences. The question was, how far was I willing to go? The thought lingered in my mind as I plotted my next move. I wanted revenge, but I also wanted to make it clear that I wouldn't let them off easy. I was ready to take it to the next level. As I sat alone in my living room, the weight of my actions settled heavily on my shoulders. Revenge felt powerful, exhilarating even, but there was a growing darkness within me that made me wonder how far I was willing to go. I had already exposed Sarah and Mark to our friends, but I wanted to dig deeper, to ensure they truly understood the consequences of their betrayal. I needed to make Sarah feel the full impact of what she had done, and I wanted Mark to realize that he had lost not just a friend, but someone who had once trusted him completely. I decided the best way to do this was to confront Sarah head-on, but I wanted it to be a calculated confrontation, one that would leave no room for her to wiggle out of responsibility. I planned a calm, collected evening where I would lay everything out for her. I wanted her to see how her actions had not only hurt me but had also tarnished her own reputation. I called her up and invited her over for dinner. "Let's talk," I said, keeping my tone steady. She agreed, and I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. As the evening approached, I prepared myself. I made dinner, something simple, but I made sure to set the table nicely and pour myself a glass of wine. I wanted to show her that I was in control, that I was not the broken man she may have been expecting. When she arrived, Sarah walked in with an air of confidence, but I could see the underlying tension in her demeanor. She was trying to play it cool, but her eyes darted around the room, searching for clues. I decided to keep things casual at first, asking her about her day and attempting light conversation. After a few minutes, I shifted gears. "Look, Sarah, we need to talk about what's been happening," I said, leaning back in my chair, studying her reaction. Her expression changed immediately. "Jake, can't we just let this go? It's not what you think," she pleaded, her voice shaky. "Not what I think. I have the messages, Sarah. I've seen how you've been with Mark," I replied, cutting her off. "You can't pretend this is just a misunderstanding. You've been lying to me." Her face flushed, and I could see the anger boiling beneath the surface. "You're overreacting. It was just a bit of flirting. It didn't mean anything," she exclaimed, her voice rising. "Didn't mean anything." I shot back, feeling my heart race. "You think that justifies what you did? You betrayed our relationship, and now you're trying to downplay it like it's nothing. You think I'm just going to sit here and accept your excuses?" I could see her struggling to formulate a response. Every excuse she tried to throw at me fell flat against the weight of the truth. I had gathered too much evidence. There was no way out for her. Then came the part I had been waiting for. I leaned in closer, lowering my voice. "You know, Sarah, this isn't just about us anymore. I've been telling our friends what's really been happening, and let me tell you, the fallout has begun. You're losing the support of everyone around you, and soon they're going to see you for who you really are." Her face paled, and I reveled in the shock that spread across her features. "You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't ruin my life just because you're angry." "I'm not ruining your life, Sarah." "You did that yourself," I said, letting the weight of my words hit her. "You wanted to play with fire, and now you're getting burned. I didn't force you to cheat. That was all your choice." For the first time, I saw vulnerability in her eyes. She was no longer the confident woman who walked into my home. She was a woman fraught with fear and regret. I watched as she struggled to find the words to defend herself, but nothing could take the sting of her actions away. As the evening went on, the conversation spiraled into arguments and accusations. But more importantly, I remained steadfast in my resolve to make her see the reality of her choices. I wanted her to understand that her actions had put a permanent stain on our relationship and that nothing would ever be the same again. After hours of back and forth, I finally delivered the final blow. "I need you to know, Sarah, that I'm not going to sit idly by while you destroy everything we built. I'm going to tell everyone what you've done, and I'm going to make sure they know the truth." Her face crumpled. "You're being cruel, Jake. This isn't who you are." I shrugged, feeling a mix of satisfaction and sadness. "Maybe this is who I need to be right now. You've turned me into someone I don't recognize, and I'm not going to let you walk away unscathed." As she stormed out, I felt a sense of closure mixed with emptiness. I had confronted her, but the emotional toll it took was heavy. I had won the battle, but at what cost? I thought about what it meant to lose someone I had once loved so fiercely. The whole situation was a mess, And while I had managed to assert control, it didn't change the fact that my heart was shattered. In the following days, I watched as Sarah's friends started to distance themselves from her. The whispers and rumors were spreading like wildfire. I knew I had made my point, but I still felt the need to ensure Mark understood the full extent of the damage he had caused. He needed to feel the impact of his choices just as much as she did. The next step in my plan was to make sure he realized that losing my friendship meant losing a significant part of his life. I had given him countless opportunities over the years, and now it was time to cut him loose. I made arrangements to meet him again, and this time I wanted him to feel the weight of the consequences he had brought upon himself. I was ready to take this game to the next level, and I wouldn't rest until both Sarah and Mark understood the ramifications of their betrayal. I wanted them to feel the pain I had felt, and I was prepared to ensure they suffered just as much as I did. My heart ached, but my resolve was stronger than ever. I was going to make them both pay. The days turned into a blur of planning and execution. I was on a mission now, and nothing was going to stand in my way. After confronting Sarah and watching her world crumble, I knew I needed to turn my attention back to Mark. He had to comprehend the gravity of what he had done, and I was determined to make him realize just how much he had lost. I arranged to meet him at a local bar, one of our old hangouts where we'd spent countless nights laughing over drinks. As I walked in, I could see him sitting at the bar, nursing a drink and looking as if he'd aged a decade in a matter of weeks. The weight of guilt was etched on his face, and I felt a twinge of satisfaction at the sight. "Hey, man," I said as I approached him, keeping my tone casual but firm. "Mind if I join you?" He looked up, surprise flickering across his features. "Jake, I didn't expect to see you here," he said, his voice strained. I took a seat next to him and ordered a drink, deliberately letting the tension hang in the air. "Yeah, well, I figured we needed to talk, about you, about Sarah, about everything." He shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting around the bar, clearly apprehensive about what I had to say. "Look, I know I messed up, and I'm really sorry, man. It was never my intention to hurt you." I raised an eyebrow, unable to hide my skepticism. "Not your intention. You think that just because you didn't plan it out, it somehow makes it okay? You went behind my back with my wife, Mark. That's not just a mistake, it's a betrayal of the highest order." He opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. "You don't get to defend yourself. You've lost that right. You need to understand that you've ruined our friendship, and I'm not sure it can ever be repaired." Mark nodded, looking contrite, but I could tell he still didn't fully grasp the extent of his actions. "I know I messed up, but we can work through this, can't we?" I shook my head. "No, we can't. You need to realize that when you made the choice to get involved with Sarah, you chose to throw away not just your friendship with me, but also your integrity. You let desire blind you, and now you're left with the consequences." I watched him struggle with the weight of my words. The guilt and shame were palpable, and for a moment I felt a flicker of sympathy. But then I remembered the pain I had gone through, the sleepless nights, the betrayal, the anger. I couldn't allow myself to feel pity for him. "Mark, this isn't just about me," I continued, leaning in closer. "You've hurt Sarah too. You think she's in a good place right now. She's lost friends, support, and her reputation. You might think it was just a fling, but it's spiraled into something much worse. You need to understand the damage you've done." He hung his head, visibly shaken. "I get it, Jake, I really do. I regret it more than you can imagine. I never meant for it to go this far." "Regret doesn't fix anything," I said flatly. "You need to face the reality of what you've done. You've lost your best friend, and for what? Few moments of excitement, it's not worth it." As he sat there, seemingly defeated, I realized that my words were finally getting through to him. I could see the realization dawning in his eyes, the true scope of his actions and the impact they had on our lives. "Jake, I'll do whatever it takes to make this right," he pleaded, desperation coloring his tone. "I'll talk to Sarah, I'll apologize, anything. Just please, let's not end it like this." "End it like what?" I replied, my voice cold. "You think you can just waltz back into our lives and pretend none of this ever happened? That's not how it works. I need time to figure this out. Right now, you're just a reminder of everything I've lost." I could see the fear creeping back into his expression. "What are you going to do?" I leaned back, taking a sip of my drink. You'll see. I have no intention of letting you off the hook easily. I'm going to let the truth come out, and there will be consequences for both of you. You'll learn that actions have repercussions, and you won't be able to escape what you've done. As I left the bar, I felt a sense of finality wash over me. I had confronted both Sarah and Mark, and in doing so, I had made my intentions clear. I was no longer the hurt husband wallowing in betrayal. I was a man on a mission, determined to ensure they both understood the impact of their actions. In the following days, I continued to let the rumors spread. I had shared the evidence with a few close friends who were shocked by the betrayal. I could see Sarah's social circle shrinking, and I knew it was only a matter of time before she would be completely isolated. But I wasn't done yet. I wanted to take it a step further. I started documenting everything: messages, dates, and conversations I had overheard. I wanted to ensure that when I was ready to reveal the truth, it would be undeniable, leaving no room for excuses. As the days passed, I became more and more consumed by my plan. I found a strange sense of comfort in knowing that I was taking control of a situation that had spiraled out of my grasp. But as satisfying as it was to see Sarah and Mark struggling, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing a part of myself in the process. I was no longer the man I used to be. I had transformed into someone who thrived on revenge, and while it felt empowering, it also felt hollow. I started to wonder if I would ever find closure, or if I would simply be left with the remnants of a broken relationship. The emotional toll was heavy, and I questioned whether I was making the right choice. But as soon as those thoughts crept in, I pushed them away. I couldn't afford to have doubts. I had a mission, and I was going to see it through to the end. And so I forged ahead, determined to ensure that the people who had betrayed me would learn the hard way that trust, once broken, can never be fully repaired. As the weeks dragged on, I became a man possessed. The initial pain of betrayal had morphed into something more sinister, a relentless drive for revenge that consumed my every waking moment. I watched Sarah's world crumble around her, and with it my heart felt like a stone. I had made a choice to ensure that she understood the consequences of her actions, and now I was prepared to take it to its logical conclusion. I devised a plan that would not only expose the affair, but would also highlight the fragility of trust in relationships. I had already laid the groundwork by sharing the details with friends, but now I wanted to make sure Sarah felt the weight of her decisions more personally. I envisioned a public confrontation, a scene that would leave no room for denial or excuses. But first, I needed to confront her one last time, to give her a chance to face the reality of what she had done without the safety net of deceit. I invited her to meet me at a local park, a place that held fond memories of our early days together. It was a symbolic choice. I wanted her to remember what we once had. When I arrived, I saw her sitting on a bench, her expression a mix of defiance and uncertainty. "Jake," she greeted me, her voice tight. "What now?" "Let's talk," I said, taking a seat beside her. "We need to discuss where we go from here, and I want you to be honest with me." She crossed her arms, clearly defensive. "I've been honest, Jake. I've told you it was a mistake. Can't we just move on?" "Move on?" I scoffed. "You think that's possible after what you did? You broke my trust, Sarah. You shattered everything we built together." Her face twisted with frustration. "I can't change what happened. I regret it, but you need to let it go. You're making this so much worse." I leaned closer, forcing her to meet my gaze. "Worse? You think this is bad? You have no idea what's coming. I've given you chance after chance to come clean about your actions. Now you're going to face the truth, and I want you to understand the repercussions of your choices." "Jake, please, you don't want to do this," she pleaded, her voice trembling, but I was resolute. "You've made it clear you want to play games, Sarah. Now it's time for you to see how those games can backfire. I'm going to expose the affair, and it's going to hurt. It's going to be uncomfortable, and you're going to have to face the people you've deceived." She shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "You wouldn't do that to me. You're better than this." But I wasn't the same man anymore. "I'm done being the nice guy who gets walked all over. You forced my hand, and now you're going to pay the price. You'll understand that actions have consequences." As I stood up to leave, I could see the despair washing over her. I had made my point, but the satisfaction I felt was tainted by an undercurrent of remorse. I had brought her to this point, and while I felt empowered, I also felt a deep sadness for what we had lost. That night, I prepared for the next phase of my plan. I reached out to a few mutual friends and arranged a gathering, one where I could unveil the truth about Sarah and Mark to everyone in attendance. I wanted it to be a spectacle, a moment that would leave no doubt about their betrayal. As the day of the gathering approached, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. I had coerced my friends to come, emphasizing the importance of being honest in relationships and how betrayal could unravel everything. I wasn't just doing this to hurt Sarah. I wanted to make a statement about trust, love, and the consequences of deception. When the day finally arrived, I felt a surge of adrenaline. I had invited a mix of our close friends, and as they gathered in my living room, I could see the curiosity on their faces. They could sense that something was off. The atmosphere was charged with tension. After everyone settled, I stood in front of them, heart pounding in my chest. Thank you all for coming. I know this isn't easy, but there's something important I need to share with you. It involves two people who have betrayed my trust and damaged our friendship. I glanced at the door, waiting for Sarah and Mark to arrive. It was time to make them face the music. When they finally walked in, I could see the confusion on their faces. Sarah's expression shifted from confusion to dread as she caught sight of the gathering. "Jake, what's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling. I took a deep breath, my heart racing. "You both know why. You're here and it's time the truth came out." With that, I launched into a recounting of their affair, detailing the messages, the late nights, and the blatant lies. As I spoke, I could see the horror wash over Sarah's face while Mark's expression turned to one of utter shame. The reactions from our friends were varied. Some were shocked, others disappointed. I could feel the weight of judgment pressing in on both Sarah and Mark. I made sure to leave no stone unturned, ensuring they both understood the extent of their betrayal. As the truth hung in the air, I looked at Sarah, her facade finally crumbling. "This is your fault, Sarah. You chose to betray my trust, and now the fallout is yours to deal with." Tears streamed down her face as she attempted to defend herself. "Jake, please, it was a mistake." But I cut her off. "A mistake that has cost you everything. You've lost my trust and now you're losing your friends. You'll have to live with that." Mark hung his head in shame, unable to meet anyone's gaze. I could see he realized the enormity of his actions, and despite my anger towards him, I felt a sense of satisfaction. He had lost not just a friend but a significant part of his life. As the gathering began to break apart, I felt a mix of emotions. I had exposed their betrayal, and now they had to face the consequences of their actions. But as the shock wore off, I realized that while I had achieved my goal, I had also lost something precious in the process. In seeking revenge, I had done the one thing I promised myself I wouldn't do. I had turned into someone I no longer recognized. I felt hollow, the satisfaction of revenge replaced by an overwhelming sense of loss. I watched as Sarah and Mark exited my home, both visibly shaken. I felt a twinge of guilt for what I had done, but at the same time, I knew I couldn't go back. The damage was done, and now I had to find a way to move forward, even if it meant rebuilding my own sense of self from the ashes of our shattered relationship. The aftermath of that gathering was a whirlwind of emotions. I had achieved my goal, but it cost me dearly. I needed to figure out how to heal from this experience and determine what my next steps would be. I couldn't keep living in this cycle of anger and revenge. It was time for me to reevaluate my life and find a way to reclaim my happiness, even if it meant letting go of the past. In the weeks that followed the gathering, I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered life. The exposure of Sarah and Mark's affair sent shockwaves through our social circle, and I had become somewhat of a pariah among our mutual friends. I hadn't anticipated how isolating the fallout would feel. While I had sought revenge and momentarily felt empowered by my actions, I was now faced with the reality of being alone in a world I once shared with my wife. Sarah's world had collapsed. The fallout had been swift and brutal. Friends who had once rallied around her were now distancing themselves. unsure how to handle the betrayal. I could see the toll it took on her through social media updates. Her posts became increasingly desperate, filled with images of her trying to retain a sense of normalcy in a life that had been turned upside down. I had access to her social media, and part of me wanted to reach out to comfort her, but I reminded myself of the pain she had caused. I had to stay firm in my resolve. As for Mark, he had become a ghost. He avoided all social interactions, likely drowning in shame. I had no desire to reach out to him. Our friendship was effectively over, and I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. The betrayal stung, and I couldn't shake the feeling of a friendship lost. In those quiet moments of reflection, I began to process what had happened. I realized that I had let my anger define my actions for far too long. Revenge had felt sweet in the beginning, but the high had faded, leaving behind an emptiness that gnawed at me. I spent many nights alone, grappling with my emotions, trying to find the balance between pain and acceptance. I decided it was time to take action, not against Sarah and Mark, but for myself. I started engaging in activities that brought me joy. I took Max, my golden retriever, for longer walks, discovering new trails and parks. I reconnected with old friends who had supported me during this tough time, leaning on them for encouragement and perspective. I began to realize that while I had lost a significant part of my life, I still had people who cared about me. I also sought counseling. I needed an outlet to discuss my feelings, to unearth the anger and sadness that had taken root within me. My therapist helped me navigate the complexities of betrayal and the importance of self-forgiveness. "You're not defined by the actions of others," she told me one day. "You have the power to reclaim your life and your happiness." With her guidance, I found the strength to let go of the resentment I had clung to. I started focusing on my own healing instead of obsessing over Sarah and Mark's downfall. I began journaling, pouring my thoughts onto the pages, which became a cathartic practice. I wrote about my pain, my anger, but also about moments of gratitude, small victories in my day-to-day life that reminded me of the good left within me. Months passed, and slowly but surely I began to feel lighter. I allowed myself to grieve the loss of my marriage, to acknowledge that it had meant something beautiful at one point. I realized that I didn't need to carry the weight of betrayal forever. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting what had happened. It meant freeing myself from the shackles of anger. I eventually came to a place of acceptance where I could look back at my marriage without bitterness. I remembered the love that had existed without letting the betrayal overshadow those memories. It was a process, but I learned that healing takes time and it's okay to move at your own pace. As spring blossomed into summer, I felt a renewed sense of hope. I took a weekend trip to the coast, feeling the warm sun against my skin and letting the salty breeze wash over me. I walked along the beach, letting the waves crash at my feet, and for the first time in a long while I allowed myself to smile. I was finally moving forward. One evening, as I sat on my porch with Max by my side, I thought about Sarah and Mark. I hoped they had learned from their mistakes, but I also realized that their journey was no longer my concern. I had my own life to rebuild, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. I learned a valuable lesson through all of this. Betrayal can destroy, but it can also teach resilience. I had faced the darkest moments of my life and emerged stronger. I had taken control of my narrative, and now I was ready to write a new chapter, one filled with hope, self-love, and the possibility of new beginnings. As I looked up at the stars that night, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I was no longer the broken man who had suffered betrayal. I was a survivor, ready to embrace the future with open arms.